all know Northrend is getting updated in the last Titan, but the most recent interview finally gave us the official confirmation. So far, we've been stuck on the World Soul Saga stuff and just pure speculations. Well, they just talked about how Northrend has changed through time and the current events that are happening, and they also mentioned the big discussion they had about none other than the Frozen Throne. Almost certainly, this will be a big focal point of the last Titan. With the recent lore, we know for a fact that the Scourge is still active, it is still pumping out new undead. So, what is everything we currently know? What will Northrend look like, and what will happen to the Frozen Throne and now that we no longer have the Lich King? So I tried using the new Polybuzz feature to recreate the Burning Legion invasion, and you can see for yourself how it turned out. With just a few clicks of a button, you can create your own comics. Just enter keywords, a brief plot description, and the software will generate your own manga. Best of all, you can do this completely free 3 times per day. You can really build whatever you want, your own characters, or even combining the established ones. So make sure to click the link in the description below and check out the Polybuzz web platform. So, we've been talking about this for a while now. It's not really news, there will be a revamp. We have talked about this since the World Soul Saga was announced. We know Northrend is going to get revamped, but a week back we got an interview, like the unofficial interview with a few developers, of them talking about their experience with the saga so far, their concerns and updates about Northrend in the last Titan. It's very interesting that they're talking about this like a month and a half before the release of Midnight, which strongly indicates that we will get the announcement this year, very likely on BlizzCon in September. Most people were thinking it's next year, but realistically they wouldn't organize this huge event to just talk about what, 12.2? With the current expansion, Midnight is coming out in March, 12.1 very likely in summer, and the last Titan is going to get announced shortly after. This is also probably the reason why they haven't given us the map for this year's content. They're very likely keeping it for pre-BlizzCon or Midnight release. It does line up well with the timeline they gave us. It will mean that the last Titan is coming out in 2027, probably near the end, which means the saga is probably going to end in like 28 or 29. To be completely clear, they really just need to hit the ball on this. I mean, so far the War Within was just, I guess, an expansion, and Midnight is not really getting a whole lot of hype despite the biggest threat ever coming to Azeroth. They have talked in this interview about how the update to Quaterlas was well received and what they have learned for their big task of updating Northrend, and honestly, the whole continent revamp is going to be the most exciting feature of pretty much everything in this World Soul Saga. They have talked about how much of a task it is to keep the legacy of Northrend and Wrath of the Lich King, because if you were Alliance, you might not even have any memories of Quaterlas, but everyone knows and remembers Northrend, like pretty much everyone that played Warcraft 3 and Wrath of the Lich King, and that was like the peak of WoW players, which means this is not just another new expansion zone. They have also talked about how Northrend has changed, and interesting enough with a few factors, one of them being time, and second, the current events. Now, it is very hard to say the exact time because even Blizzard doesn't really know, but we had a time skip post Shadowlands, so it's probably been like 20 years since we last visited Northrend. The last update we got of Northrend was right after the Shadowlands with the book called Exploring Azeroth Northrend, which kinda went through the lore of all the zones. However, honestly, I can't say for certain whether Blizzard will actually stick to the canon and remember this book. The interesting question is whether Northrend was actually even hit by the Cataclysm, because as you may know, the Cataclysm, the Shattering, happened right after we left, after Wrath, and pretty much it reshaped all the zones on Azeroth. I mean, it even hit the opposite side of Northrend Pandaria, altering the mist that was protecting it, which is how we got there in the first place. I mean, the book Exploring Azeroth Northrend didn't really write down any significant changes to the zones, and we did technically go to Northrend in the Shadowlands pre-patch, so they didn't update anything there either. However, for lore purposes, it could be interesting to see some changes just based on the Shattering. Maybe Zul'Drak will change, or some areas that have been split or divided. It doesn't have to be a massive change that will contradict the lore, but it would be interesting to see the continent impacted by the Shattering. They kinda confirmed a thing in that interview that we're not going back to just updated Northrend, like Northrend with updated assets. It's going to be a different place. Two factors have changed, as they said, time and the current events. I'm guessing by time they mean potentially Cataclysm, but also the 20 years of time, meaning some issues may have been solved. You can check out a video I did when the book was released, previously covering Northrend, but we do have some updates to like the quest lines, what happened with the Tonka, the Vrykul, and the such. However, something really interesting thing they talked about in this interview is the long discussion they said they had about whether we are going to go to the Frozen Throne or not, which, as you may know, was pretty much the center of Northrend. I mean, the whole point of Wrath of the Lich King and the most of the premise of Warcraft 3, literally Warcraft 3 the Frozen Throne. I'm guessing as they brought that up, we are going to return to the Frozen Throne, but the really interesting question is, what are we going to return to? I mean, the crown is no longer there, the Lich King doesn't exist, and neither does the jail. Well, luckily we did get some updates, and if you watch my videos, you might have heard me talking about this many times. The Scourge is still a thing, and that has been confirmed, even now with the small incursions around midnight, but in the book itself it was confirmed that all the Scourge machinery is still active, and the Scourge is very much a threat. Keep in mind, this is post-Shadowlands lore, so pretty much right around what they should be now. It is implied that there is no central figure to rule them, and very likely more intelligent beings could take over certain parts of the faction. The machinery in particular is said to have been pumping out undead pretty much non-stop since Wrath, so they haven't been in decline at all. I mean, a lot of people think the Scourge is just gone. The only difference was that when Artis was ruling, the forges were like working double time and pumping undead non-stop. Now, without such a central figure and the control, the undead building process has definitely slowed down a lot, but it has not been stopped. So very likely we will still see the Scourge, but I think the Frozen Throne is going to be more relevant for the Titans than the Scourge. You know, Shadowlands lore and all that, but if you remember, there was literally a giant forge beneath Icecrown that siphoned the essence of the World Soul when Shadowlands ended, and apparently the Jailer wanted the Frozen Throne in that exact place for a reason. It's not a random location, so lore-wise, as the Titans are coming back and the whole World Soul saga is wrapping up, I'm almost certain there is something very important in that exact place in Northrend. There is a reason why the essence of Azeroth is coming out from under the Frozen Throne, and furthermore, to not repeat myself for the millionth time, but based on the Dragonflight book and the Dragonflight ending where Iridikron foreshadowed his return in The Last Titan, that he will be waiting, we have learned more. We know that he had a giant base underneath Northrend, and we have placed it somewhere right around Radgate based on the book descriptions, so there is definitely an underground system under Northrend that we will soon discover. The other factor they mentioned, current events, implies that changes are yet to happen in Midnight, which will reflect on Northrend. We can only really speculate wildly at this point. All we know is that the Titans will be returning, so I'm guessing some sort of a big impact or something void related will happen there. I don't think the Titans are going to just come through the door in Ulduar. Another interesting thing that I mentioned in the previous video that I released in this interview that you can check out is more detail, as well as they said that they have been inspired by Midnight and the Last Titan revamp, and that they plan to do the same thing to more older zones, in particular parts of Kalimdor and the Eastern Kingdoms, which implies that we may be seeing that after the World Soul saga. In particular, they mentioned the Stone Tower Mountains, but many other zones that had a lot of lore and background that have just been stuck in time. The entire point of this interview is that they want to make Azeroth feel more alive. Some zones only kind of exist for you to just do the story, and then they just get completely like stuck in time and become completely relevant. They want us to relive these zones and update them, so I think there is a really big hint in this interview for what we may be seeing after the World Soul saga as well. Thanks for watching. Check out why no one is playing these races based on the statistics that we have by clicking on the screen, and check out my brand new Witcher lore channel that I just opened by clicking on the screen as well. See you next time!